I should probably start with the moment her older sister cornered me and said, "I'm done pretending I don't want you." But the truth is, that moment didn't appear out of nowhere. It grew out of 100 smaller ones, moments I didn't recognize until much later, when it was already too late not to feel something. The first time I saw her, really saw her, was a Tuesday that smelled like engine oil and burnt coffee. I work at a small repair shop tucked behind a row of old apartment buildings. Most days blend together. The hiss of air compressors, the clatter of tools, the stale radio playing songs older than me. Routine. Predictable. The kind of place where nothing surprising ever happens. Except she walked in. Not dramatically. Not like a movie. She didn't flip her hair or slow motion her way through the door. She just stepped inside quietly, holding her keys between her fingers the way someone does when they're thinking too hard about something else. Her name was Layla. Mid-40s, maybe older, maybe younger. She had the kind of face you couldn't pin down because you were too busy trying not to stare. Confident, but not loud about it. The kind of confidence that made you straighten your posture without realizing. She looked around like she already expected disappointment. "My car's making a sound," she said. That was it. No explanation. No smile. "What kind of sound?" I asked. She hesitated. Not because she didn't know, but because she didn't want to say something wrong. "It's embarrassing," she muttered. Like something is rattling that shouldn't rattle. I tried to bite back a smile, but she caught it. Her eyes narrowed. Not angry, just assessing me. And then she gave this tiny, reluctant smirk, like she hated that she found the moment funny. In hindsight, that was the spark, the first time something unspoken crossed between us. I checked her car out back. She followed, arms crossed. Not close, but not far either. I could feel her eyes on my hands as I opened the hood. Not like she didn't trust me, more like she was watching how I worked. And I felt it. I shouldn't have, but I did. "You're good at this," she said quietly. "Yeah." I wiped my hands, suddenly unsure why my chest felt warm. She nodded, slowly. "You listen more than you talk. People don't do that anymore." I didn't know what to say to that. Compliments usually bounce off me, but hers stayed. Settled. Took up space. While I worked, she wandered the shop, touching nothing but looking at everything. The tools, the photos taped above the counter, the old calendar with peeling edges. Like she was piecing me together from scraps. I stole a few glances, small ones, quick ones, but every time I looked away, I felt the heat rise behind my ears. When I finished, I walked back to her with the report. "It was a loose heat shield," I said. "Nothing serious." She let out a breath she'd been holding. "You have no idea how long I've been hearing that noise." Then, softer, "Thank you." She said it like it mattered. Like I mattered. But the moment that stuck with me, the one that kept replaying later, happened as she reached for her keys. Our fingers brushed. Barely. Accidentally. And she froze. Not dramatically. Just a small, involuntary stillness, like someone hit pause on her breath. Then she pulled back, quick but not panicked, and cleared her throat. "I should go," she whispered. But she didn't move for a full second. Neither did I. And even after she finally walked out the door, I stood there with my hand half raised, still feeling the ghost of that touch. I didn't know why it mattered. I only knew I couldn't stop thinking about it. I didn't expect to see her again so soon. 3 days after fixing her car, I was closing the shop early when I heard that same hesitant rattle outside. Her car rolled in, slower this time, like she wasn't sure she should be here. She stepped out with a small wave that didn't match her expression. Her smile was polite, but her eyes tired, guarded. Like something was weighing on her she didn't want anyone to notice. "I swear I'm not making excuses to come back," she said. "I didn't say you were. You were thinking it." I shrugged, mostly to hide the way my chest tightened hearing her voice again. "What's wrong with it now?" "I don't know," she said, rubbing her forehead. "It just feels off. Everything feels off today." There was something raw under her words, a crack she didn't mean to reveal. She looked away quickly, pretending to study the pavement. I stepped closer. "Want me to take a look?" She hesitated before handing over her keys. Not the brisk, confident woman from before. This time her fingers were cold, her grip too loose, like she didn't have the energy to pretend today. Inside the shop, she wandered again, but not with that curious ease she had last time. Her shoulders were tense. Her hands kept finding each other, twisting the rings she wore. "You okay?" I asked without looking up from the engine. She didn't answer immediately. I could hear her shifting, arms crossing, uncrossing. "I had a long morning," she finally murmured. "A longer week, and I didn't want to go home yet." That last part slipped out. She caught it. I heard a soft exhale, almost a laugh, but not really. "You're too easy to talk to," she said. "That's the problem." I pretended I didn't feel that land somewhere too close to my ribs. When I finished, I waved her over. She walked closer, the soft sound of her boots tapping against the concrete, and stood almost within reach. I could smell something faint and warm, sandalwood, or maybe just the memory of it. "It's nothing mechanical," I said. "Your car's fine." She nodded once. Figures. Then, after a beat too long, "I guess I just needed a reason to step away from everything." I looked up at her. She wasn't hiding the exhaustion now, the subtle slump of her shoulders, the way her eyes didn't meet mine for more than a second. "You don't need a reason," I said quietly. She swallowed, a small tell, and finally looked straight at me. For the first time, she didn't seem older or untouchable or composed. She just seemed human, someone holding too much. And I realized I'd memorized more about her than I meant to. How her laugh never fully commits. How her hands stay still unless she's nervous. How she runs her thumb over her palm when she's trying not to say something. She did that now. "I should go," she whispered. But she didn't move. Neither did I. Her hand brushed the side of my arm as she reached for her keys on the counter. Not an accident this time. Too lightly. Too intentionally. And she paused there, fingertips barely grazing me, as if she was waiting for something neither of us had the right to give. That tiny, charged stillness. I think that was the moment everything shifted. I didn't plan on seeing her that night. I didn't even plan on staying late. It just happened. A stack of unfinished work, a storm rolling in, the shop lights buzzing overhead like they were trying to stay awake with me. The rain started slow, then turned into the kind that makes the whole world sound like static. I was packing up when her car pulled in again, wipers struggling against the downpour. She stepped out wearing no coat, hair damp at the ends. Her expression wasn't calm this time. It was tight, conflicted, like she'd argued with herself all the way here. "Sorry," she said as she pushed the door open. "I know it's late. I just couldn't go home." I didn't ask why. Something in her face said she didn't want to hear her own explanation out loud. "You're welcome to sit inside," I said, gesturing toward the small break room. "It's warm." She hesitated at the doorway like stepping in meant something she wasn't sure she should give herself permission for. Inside, the room was nothing special. A metal table, old chairs, a coffee machine with a temper. But when she sat across from me, elbows resting on the table, it felt like the whole place shifted around her. Her phone buzzed. She flipped it over without looking, face tightening for a second before smoothing out again. "Everything okay?" I asked. Just someone who doesn't get the hint. A small laugh slipped out, but it was hollow. Then quieter. An ex who thinks every silence means I owe him an explanation. She rubbed her temples. Not dramatically, just tired. A kind of tired that made me want to say something reassuring, even though I wasn't sure what right I had. "You don't have to answer," I murmured. "That's the problem," she said. "I know." And still, she stopped herself, staring at her hands. A moment stretched, then another. The room felt too small, too warm, too aware of every inch between us. "You ever feel like you're making choices you don't believe in anymore?" she whispered. I swallowed. "Every day." Her eyes flicked up. For a second, everything we weren't supposed to say hovered right there between our breaths. She smiled, but it wasn't confidence this time. It was relief, like she wasn't alone for once. Thunder cracked outside, shaking the windows. She startled slightly, and without thinking, she leaned closer. Not a big movement, just enough that her knee brushed mine under the table. Neither of us moved away. Her breath hitched, the tiniest sound. I felt it more than heard it. "I shouldn't be here," she said softly. "Then why are you?" Her eyes dropped to my hand resting beside hers. She ran her thumb over her palm again. That tell she hadn't realized I'd memorized. "I don't know," she whispered. Or maybe I do. Her phone buzzed again, loud in the small room. She glanced at it, jaw tightening. The spell broke, but only halfway. We should, she began, but the sentence faded into the hum of the storm. She stood slowly, like her body didn't fully agree with the decision. I rose too, instinctively, and we ended up far too close. Close enough that I felt the warmth of her breath mix with mine. She reached for the door, stopped, turned back slightly. Her fingers hovered, just for a heartbeat, near the fabric of my sleeve, as if she was about to hold on. And then she let her hand fall. The next time I saw her, nothing dramatic happened. No storm, no broken car, no excuse at all. She just appeared in the doorway of the shop, like she'd been walking toward it for a long time without knowing she was going there. Do you have a minute? She asked. Her voice was soft, but not unsure. More like someone who'd rehearsed that exact sentence in her head 100 times. I nodded, wiping oil from my hands even though there was nothing on them. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her, and for some reason that sound felt final, like a lock sliding into place. She didn't sit. Neither did I. Instead, she wrapped her arms around herself, staring at the floor as though it might offer her an escape. I can't keep pretending this is nothing, she said. My breath caught, not because I didn't know what she meant, but because I'd been waiting for someone to saw it first. What are we doing? She asked, lifting her eyes to mine. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't angry. It was scared, honest, bare. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Because the truth was simple and impossible at the same time, I didn't know either. Not in any way that made sense. She stepped closer, slow and deliberate, like every inch mattered. We barely know each other, she whispered. And yet, I keep ending up here. Her fingers clenched the fabric of her sleeves. And every time I leave, she added, I tell myself it was the last time. I felt something shift in the air, not a confession, but the weight of one pressing to get out. You could just stop coming, I said quietly. She let out a breath, halfway between a laugh and a surrender. You think I haven't tried? We stood there in the middle of the shop, surrounded by tools and dust and unsaid things, and for the first time the silence didn't feel comfortable. It felt like standing on a frozen lake, hearing the cracks spread beneath your feet. You're young, she said finally. Not judgmental. Just stating a fact she hated hearing aloud. You have your whole life ahead of you. So, my voice was sharper than I meant. What does that have to do with anything? Her jaw tensed. Everything. I stepped closer, matching her honesty even though it scared me. When I'm around you, I said carefully, I feel like I'm actually seeing someone. Not pretending. Not performing. She blinked, and that one blink held an entire storm. That's exactly the problem, she whispered. Her gaze traveled over my face, slow, searching, conflicted. She looked like she was trying to memorize something she had no right to want. I don't trust myself around you, she said. The words didn't sound like an admission. They sounded like a fracture. We stood so close now that the warmth of her breath ghosted against my collarbone. She looked up at me, and for a moment I thought she would say something to break us open completely. Instead, she exhaled a trembling breath, the kind that comes from holding back too much for too long. Then she said the line that hollowed me out. I don't know who I'm becoming when I look at you, and that terrifies me. The twist didn't come in a dramatic confession or an argument. It came in the form of a small, accidental sound, a voicemail chime that filled the shop after she'd forgotten to silence her phone. We both heard it. She froze. I pretended I didn't notice, but she already pulled the phone from her pocket, thumb hovering above the screen in a way that told me she didn't want to hear whatever waited for her. She listened anyway. The message played on speaker for half a second, long enough for a man's voice to slip out. Layla, it's been 5 years. You promised you'd. She shut it off. Fast. Almost panicked. And suddenly the air changed. She didn't look at me. She just pressed her palm to her forehead, breathing shallowly, like the words were needles she was trying to pull out of her skin. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't want you to hear that. You don't have to explain. No. She cut in softer. I do. She sank onto the old wooden stool near the counter, elbows on her knees. I'd never seen her sit like that. Not upright and poised, but small. Folded. stripped of all the careful confidence she normally carried. That voice, she said, staring at the concrete floor, was my husband. I blinked. I didn't know you were. I'm not. A bitter laugh slipped out. Not anymore. She rubbed her thumb over her palm. That nervous tell, sharper this time. He died, she said. 5 years ago next month. My heartbeat stumbled. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. Her voice was too steady, which somehow hurt more. It was sudden. A heart thing. No warning. She took a strained breath. And the voicemail? It's from an old phone he left behind. I've never turned it off. It plays the same 3 messages once in a while. I don't know why the phone still has life in it, but it does. I didn't know what to say. There was no right sentence, no comforting phrase that wouldn't feel like an insult to the depth of what she'd just revealed. You remind me of him, she said quietly. My head lifted. I do, not in the way you think. She looked at my hands first, then up at my face. It wasn't romantic. It was searching, like she was trying to place me inside a memory she wasn't sure she wanted to revisit. He listened, she murmured. He really listened. And he had this softness he wasn't ashamed of. Her voice broke there, not fully, just enough that she paused to swallow. I forgot what it felt like to be seen like that. The room fell so still it felt suspended. The rain outside had stopped without either of us noticing. I'm not trying to replace anyone, I said softly, because she needed to hear it. I know. Her eyes finally met mine, raw and unguarded. That's what scares me. A breath shuddered from her chest, the first real crack in her composure. Then, gently, as if the words were slipping out before she could stop them, she whispered, just for a moment. I wanted to remember what it felt like to be wanted. The night everything finally settled into place wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no confessions, no trembling declarations. Just the two of us sitting on the cold floor of the shop after closing, backs against the wall, legs stretched out like we'd run out of ways to pretend nothing was happening. She'd come because she couldn't sleep. I stayed because I didn't want her to sit in that sleeplessness alone. For a long time, neither of us spoke. We didn't have to. Something softer was happening between us, something that didn't need language. Her breathing slowed first. Mine followed. I shouldn't have told you all that, she finally whispered. You should have, I said. I'm glad you did. She let out a soft exhale, the kind that comes when someone stops holding tension in their throat. You're too gentle with me, she murmured. I don't know how else to be with you. She turned her head at that. Not fully, just enough for her hair to brush my shoulder. A small, almost shy contact, like she was testing if the world would break for allowing it. When it didn't, she leaned a little closer. After he died, she said quietly, I stopped letting people matter. It was easier that way. No expectations. No disappointments. I swallowed. I get that. You shouldn't, she whispered. You're too young to understand losing someone that deeply. Maybe. I nudged my knee lightly against hers. Or maybe age has nothing to do with it. She smiled. Barely, but enough that her eyes softened. What are we doing? She asked again, though this time it wasn't fearful. More like she was asking where to place something fragile and important. I don't know, I said, but it feels real. She closed her eyes at real, as if the word hit deeper than anything I could have told her outright. I don't want to hurt you, she whispered. You're not. You could, she murmured. Easily. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I placed my hand on the concrete floor beside hers, close enough that our fingers almost touched but didn't. She noticed. Her breath hitched the smallest amount. And then, very slowly, like she was making a decision she'd been circling for weeks, she shifted her hand until her little finger brushed mine. Not held, not intertwined, just touching. A quiet collapse. No fanfare. No turning back. We stayed like that, side by side on the floor, our pinkies touching as if that 1 inch of skin could hold everything we weren't saying out loud. She leaned her head against my shoulder, not fully, just a soft, tired weight, like she needed a place to rest, and somehow decided I was safe enough. I don't know what this is, she whispered. Me neither, I said, but it doesn't feel wrong. Her sigh was warm against the fabric of my shirt. A small, trembling release. She didn't pull away. Neither did I. The world didn't change, but something inside the quiet between us did. And she said, barely audible, I think I'm finally ready to let something matter again. I'm telling this part from where I stand now. After everything settled, after the storm inside, both of us finally learned how to breathe. It's strange, looking back, how two people who never planned to collide somehow ended up changing the shape of each other's worlds. Not dramatically, not loudly, but in quiet shifts, like the way dawn doesn't ask permission before turning the sky gold. Back then, I thought love was supposed to announce itself. A spark, a moment, something cinematic, something you could point to and say, there. That's when everything changed. But with her, it wasn't like that. The change was slower, softer, almost imperceptible until it wasn't. Until one day, I realized the way I spoke, the way I walked, the way I breathed, so much of it had begun to fall into rhythm with hers. And she changed too. She would never admit it out loud, but she softened. Not in the fragile sense, but in the way steel softens when it's being reshaped. Still strong, still unbreakable, but different now. Kinder now. She started letting people in again, not all at once, but in small, cautious openings. And sometimes, when she didn't think I noticed, she'd smile in that quiet way of hers, the one that said she finally believed life still had gentle things to offer. What we learned, it wasn't some grand lesson you'd put at the end of a book. It was simpler, more human. We learned that love isn't always a story of fireworks. Sometimes it's just two people choosing to stay, choosing to show up even when it felt safer to disappear, choosing to speak when silence felt easier, choosing to be honest, first with themselves, then with each other. I think the biggest lesson was this: love doesn't fix you, but it does remind you that you're worth fixing. She taught me that without ever meaning to. And I think, in some way, I taught her too. Now, when I look back, it isn't the tension or the near moments or the unsaid words that stay with me. It's the afterglow, the warmth of knowing that what we shared wasn't perfect, but was still real, that it mattered, that it made us better, even in small, unspoken ways. And maybe that's all love really is. Two lives brushing against each other long enough to leave a mark. So here's the truth, from the present, from a place of calm I didn't used to believe in. I wouldn't change any of it. Not the confusion, not the silence, not the ache, because every part of it led us to this understanding, this peace, this quiet knowing that some people walk into your life to remind you of parts of yourself you forgot you deserved. And maybe that's enough. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?